welcome to tonight's EllieMD Men's Health Educational Series. We're so glad you're here as we continue our mission to support healthier, longer lives through education, innovation, and community. Tonight, we're excited to welcome Jennifer Woodward, who I had the pleasure of spending a couple days with just a few days ago. She's a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and hormone health educator with a master's in integrative nutrition, a former pharmaceutical representative turned functional health practitioner. Jennifer brings a grounded, science-backed approach to hormone health and vitality. She's helped over 1,200 clients navigate midlife transition and is the author of Easy Perimenopause, the Essential Guide to Modern Midlife, with a second book currently in progress. Go you, Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us again tonight. To start, can you share a little about yourself? And I mean, the men are probably looking like she's a perimenopause menopause coach. What does she know about
Yes.
us? But tell them why and how you know just as much about them as you do about us.
Thank you, honey. Yes, I'm so happy to be back here on the EllieMD educational series. And yes, my specialty and my forte is definitely perimenopause and women's health. But my real specialty is people. Trained as an FDN, I know the physiology of the human body, and it's not different really between men and women. And actually, the closer we all get to midlife, the narrower that intersect is. So we're going to see a lot today in our presentation that men's brains and women's brains, men's bodies and women's bodies start reacting very similarly. Past our 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I think you guys are going to be surprised at how we're more alike than we are different. Also, I will tell you, I have been mostly happily married, totally happily married. But you've been married for 25 years and you say like mostly happily married. I've been married to my high school sweetheart for the last 25 years. This guy is a testosterone driven former D1 athlete. He swam for the University of California. He is doing his own peptide journey. We have 4 children. I have 3 boys. 3 of those are teenage. I have a daughter too, but my 3 boys are teenagers. So I will tell you, I know men. I know the male body. I know the male brain. And I really just love hormones. And again, at a, existential level, though women have, 10 times less testosterone than men, we have more testosterone than we do estrogen. So I've been working in the hormone optimization space for both women and men for the last 10 years. And I cannot wait to dive in to the subject nobody really wants to talk about, but everybody wants to show up for.
And what is that? Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's do it. With Valentine's Day just around the corner, performance and connection are top of mind for a lot of people. But midlife obviously brings a lot of changes that it can affect the body. Um, when men notice shifts in their libido, what's typically going on beneath the surface, would you say?
Yeah, and there is a lot, especially in midlife. When you think of like as a man, your 20-year-old self, your 30-year-old self, you could probably go to the gym and eat some pizza and drink beer and wake up and have abs the next morning. But as we get into our late 30s, 40s, and 50s, a lot of libido issues start to get caused by insulin resistance. And that's kind of like a creeping sort of thing where, you just aren't as metabolically healthy as you were before. Inflammation, chronic stress, not eating well, not sleeping well, all of that combines to drive this insulin resistance, which I mean, definitely affects our libido. Chronic stress is a huge one. I know how hard, men in midlife are working. They're trying to take care of their families. They're at the top of their professions. Those are your peak earning years. You're probably trying to take care of like aging parents and children. There's just a lot going on. And so that chronic stress really drives cortisol, your main stress hormone, up. And when your cortisol levels are super high, it kind of pushes out your other hormones, so to speak, including testosterone. So there is a hormonal component too. Poor sleep is another one. A lot of guys just don't sleep well. They wake up, in the middle of the night. They don't go to sleep until, midnight. They're getting up at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock to go work out or get to work. Dopamine is another one. Dopamine is our joy neurotransmitter. And this is a huge one too, because of the society that we live in. Like we are constantly trying to get dopamine hits for ourselves, like on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. My husband's like a big YouTuber, YouTube Reels, and he's like, "Why are you on Instagram again?" I'm like, "Dude, YouTube Shorts is the exact same thing as Instagram, okay? So get off my back. It's the
That's
same
right.
thing." But that dopamine definitely, is going to lower the more that we're looking for kind of like outside hits of joy. And then, inflammation is a huge one. And finally, truly, physically, blood flow issues are a problem. Testosterone starts to lower in midlife, but even low testosterone or optimized testosterone has a really hard time overriding a stress brain, clogged arteries, or really exhausted mitochondria, which is, how we make energy for our body.
We keep hearing about metabolic health, and when people hear metabolic health, they think the metabolism, how fast or slow we burn food and produce energy. So, can you explain metabolic health, what's involved in those pathways, and what's involved here, and how do they affect and play a role in desire, stamina, and confidence?
Yes. Yes. So you can actually quantify this as a midlife man or woman. You can go to your doctor and ask for a blood panel that looks for markers of metabolic health, like a lipid panel, cholesterol panel, a CBC. You can look for markers of inflammation that has to do with your metabolic health, like C-reactive protein or homocysteine. You can actually look at insulin and blood glucose on your lab markers. And so, I can tell you what metabolic health is, but you can also figure out for yourself what your numbers say, how metabolically healthy you actually are. A healthy metabolism, long story short, it's going to be a healthy weight and healthy mood and healthy energy, a healthy functioning body, however you define that. But really, a healthy metabolism for men too keeps blood flow and oxygenation strong. Hormones like testosterone and DHEA and even insulin and like leptin or fullness hormone keeps those balanced and also keeps energy production high. Now, for a lot of men in today's society who aren't eating appropriately and are super stressed out, and maybe are under exercising or over exercising, don't get enough sleep, this is really going to lead to that blood sugar and insulin imbalance that we were talking about earlier. And when that's out of control, testosterone is going to drop, your erections are going to weaken, and the fatigue that you have is just going to kill any desire that your body has. And we're going to see that, you need that brain piece and you need that body piece in order to have a healthy libido for men or women in midlife.
So, Jennifer, when do people start noticing these changes? At what point in their life? Because I'm hearing of 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds that also suffer from ED, right? But when, those are obviously the outliers, but when does this change typically start to begin to happen in
We're
men?
actually, yeah, that's a great question because we're actually seeing it earlier and earlier. 18-year-olds is definitely an outlier, but whereas this used to happen in mid 50s, late 50s, like we're starting to see this happen to men in their mid 30s. And it really is a lot of lifestyle driven issues that will cause this. Like we don't eat great diets. We never see the sun. We spend more time in front of a computer than we do, outside in the sunshine. We are really stressed out. We're not optimizing our minerals. We don't get enough protein. And so all of these things contribute to the slow decline of the metabolism and the body. And the libido is just a offshoot of that. Like your body has to feel safe, your brain has to feel safe, and you have to feel somewhat nurtured in order to have a healthy libido. If your body feels sick and metabolically unhealthy, it's really unusual to have a, raging libido.
That's interesting. So, before we move into the brain and nervous system and how they influence things, why do so many men feel frustrated when they're doing everything right, but they still notice changes in desire and performance?
Yeah, that is a bummer. 'Cause they're like, I'm eating good. I'm going to the gym. Like, my wife is really hot. I don't understand like why my libido is not there. And that's really because we can lift weights. And this is for men and women, but particularly men. You can be lifting weights, you can be eating more protein, but this does not fix your nervous system being burnt out. And libido, it starts in the brain for men and women. When men are younger, there's like, of course, a visual component, like a sound component, like way more of a physical component for men, like in their teens teens and 20s. But as they get older, there's absolutely a mental component too. And so that nervous system burnout where you have that bone deep fatigue and that hidden insulin resistance where you're not metabolizing sugar correctly, your body's just kind of drained of mitochondrial energy. And then your brain changes, like your dopamine receptors are all off because you're like my husband on YouTube Shorts all the time or me on Instagram all the time. It really can change your level of response to things like diet and exercise. And so essentially, men are treating the surface, but the real drivers of this metabolic insufficiency kind of stay untouched.
So let's shift our conversation to the brain. How does the brain and nervous system influence libido differently than purely the hormonal pathways?
Yeah. Libido is more of a state of mind too. And libido starts in the brain, not the genitals. We talked about dopamine a little bit. Dopamine creates the desire, right? Dopamine is your pleasure neurotransmitter. And I talk about it like with my clients with regards to like food, right? And like alcohol. But man, our birthright, like our primal birthright as humans is sexual desire, right? And dopamine is a big part of that. So dopamine creates desire, but then that calm nervous system is what's actually going to allow physical arousal. And sometimes there's a disconnect between that piece of the brain firing off and being like, I could. And then the body being like, I'm just too stressed out. I can't. And then stress hormones can shut down that dopamine receptor and can also shut down the brain. Not like completely, right? But that desire, it can shut down the desire if hormones are off. Like even if testosterone looks normal, that doesn't necessarily mean that men have enough free testosterone floating around their system. And even if they do, if their brain and their nervous system are off, it's going to be really, really hard to have a healthy libido.
So how does emotional stress and that mental load affect desire? What can they
Yeah.
do about this?
Okay, this is good. Yes, we can get to action items. Like, what can they do about it? Because chronic stress, it keeps your body in survival mode. When you think about being in survival mode, men and women, like you think about like running from a bear or, running out into the middle of the street to like grab your kid that's about to be hit by a car. Like you are in action mode. Your pupils dilate, like your bowels kind of clench up, you've got tunnel vision, your heart rate increases. All of that sort of sounds like sexual desire, right? But if it's happening to the body over and over and over again, and other stress hormones like cortisol and dopamine are being released at the same time, the body just kind of starts to break down. It sees that as its new normal, that chronic stress is just where we're freaking living now. So we're in survival mode. And survival mode blocks sexual signaling. It just does time and time again. Maybe when we were younger, survival mode could be like, oh yeah, like, okay, let's get in the back of the car. But when we got all of these other things going on in our life, the brain feels unsafe, it feels overwhelmed. And so it's going to turn off your libido because your libido is no longer necessary. Turning off your libido conserves the energy that your body really, really needs.
Yeah, there's men shaking their head. They're like, I knew my wife was a problem. This is why. She's the one stressing me out. Men, nothing is off limits. Please post your questions
Yes.
in the chat. So let's talk a little about you mentioned dopamine. There's a great peptide. Let's talk about, besides environmental changes, but there's a great peptide called PT141 that works on dopamine levels in the brain pathways. Can you talk a little bit more about what PT141 does and how, although it was FDA approved for women, how it also helps and promotes sexual health for men?
Absolutely, yeah. So PT141, it works in the brain the same way that dopamine does, the same way that a lot of our neurotransmitters do.
Which
And
is,
it's
by the way, sorry,
no,
different
yeah.
than Viagra and Cialis, completely different, right? Maybe you could
Yep.
share that a little bit too.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too with the tadalafil, like the tadalafil working on, physical pathways in the body and allowing more nitric oxide into, the body itself. These all work together to really help restore desire. But the brain component for men at this point is just more important than it was in their 20s and 30s because the body just doesn't respond the same way after decades of chronic stress. So PT141, it does work in the brain. It's able to help you restore desire. Ask me how I know, okay? Ask my husband how he knows. Like, we've tried this. I mean, we have a pretty healthy sex life, being married 25 years. We're like college sweethearts. We're both, fit. We're both active and healthy. We enjoy having a sexual relationship. But I was like, hey, I want to try that. That sounds fun. And we did. It was great. And so that PT 141 is letting you restore that desire. It's helping your body reconnect to the arousal signals. You guys all remember those, right? It might go back 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years, the arousal signals, but they're still there. And PT 141 also works, like Honey was saying, differently than Cialis, differently than Viagra, but still will work on a physical aspect of the body and allow a stronger erection. It treats the wiring problem and not just like the plumbing problem, right? Viagra,
Mm.
Cialis, those treat the plumbing problem. Also, I never hear a great story about Viagra or Cialis. It's always like a horror story. I've heard great stories about PT 141.
I love that, by the way, that analogy, the wiring signals instead of the plumbing signals. You're absolutely right. Um, so how does PT-141 work at the brain level? We discussed that a little bit more. Do you mind elaborating how now that feeds into the plumbing system too? So now you got the mental stimulation. How does it feed into plumbing and the blood flow from
Yeah,
there?
yeah. Well, it's going to allow the body to relax. When your nervous system is relaxed, oxygenation is better, blood flow is better. And so again, like Viagra literally forces blood into the penis, right? There are components of tadalafil and then PT-141 that just allow more nitric oxide into the body, into your capillaries, into your blood. And so it's almost like it's just gentler, if that makes sense. And it doesn't start in the physical body. It starts by working on the brain. So the brain's almost you're giving the brain a new signal to tell the body what to do to increase that blood flow to the penis.
Someone wrote, is it true that spontaneous erections can occur because of PT-141?
This is what I always tell my clients. There's only one way to find out. Try it yourself. I mean, that hasn't been our experience, or I probably have 10 clients, 10, maybe 12 clients who've tried it, men and women. I've not yet had a case of a spontaneous erection, but that's a very small sample size. I'll keep my ears peeled and report back to you guys, but it's not going to be like Viagra where you've got a 4 hour erection or an 8 hour painful erection. Usually the effects of this are going to wear off, and it is gentler too. Like a peptide is a specific signaling molecule for your body. So PT-141 is going to attach to a specific cell receptor site. It's going to work on that dopamine site. It's not going to be like a carpet bomb for your body like Viagra or Cialis.
So, fun fact, PT-141 is FDA approved as bremelanotide for perimenopausal women, but it was discovered by a gentleman who was trying to give himself a tan. I think he was Australian, if I'm not mistaken, but he was this Australian man, and it goes by the name melanotan, right?
Yep.
And he noticed not only did I get a tan, but I also got an erection out of it. I can't, what's going on here? So then they studied it and come to find out it works on similar receptors and they approved it for women. So although it is for women, it works just as great, if not just as well for men because it is a lot of sexuality and sex is psychological. So now let's move on to tadalafil.
Mhm.
Because it's catching a lot of spotlight actually. Tadalafil, a lot of people are microdosing it for cardiovascular health benefits nowadays, but let's talk about what tadalafil does.
Yep.
The piping,
The piping, the plumbing.
the
So that
plumbing.
actually makes sense that people are using it for cardiovascular health because it's a vasodilator. So it does work to relax blood vessels. And we know like this is a big problem for, Western men and women, clogged arteries, clogged blood vessels. And so I can see why that's so helpful from a cardiovascular benefit, but from a sexual standpoint, relaxing the blood vessels of the penis allows more nitric oxide in, allows more blood flow in, and really supports a harder erection, which I can't believe I just said, on a live YouTube, but it does. And that's something that a lot of men are struggling with, like past the age of 30, past the age of 40. They still mentally feel aroused, but it's hard for their body to respond the way it did when they were in their teens and 20s.
Now, if someone is experiencing that they can't get an erection, if there are any men that can't get an erection, uh, s- is that telling of an underlying health issue of any sort? Like this is time to go to a cardiologist and get things checked out, or what's going on there?
Yeah, I'm not a doctor, but I do recommend in my practice that you are getting regular physicals every year after the age of 40, including blood work. So I like to encourage my clients, like go to your doctor and get your cardiovascular panel, get things like C-reactive protein, which is a good marker of cardiovascular health, get your lipids done and look at your LDL to HDL ratio, look at VLDL, LDLH. These are all good markers just to see like on the inside what's going on with my heart. Obviously, you can do like a stress test or a calcium test too, but it's if you are experiencing erections and you're in like a, healthy, loving relationship, or you have a partner that you think is fantastic, right? And you want to have sex, you just can't, then do look at some of those underlying issues with regards to the heart. But probably more than that, honey, it's insulin resistance. It's men who are, pre-clinically diabetic, who are not utilizing glucose correctly, can't make enough energy. It takes a lot of energy to get a hard on, you know? It takes a lot of energy to sleep. It takes a lot of energy to digest our food. And so if we don't have the metabolic energy we need because our glucose is too high, we're not eating a proper diet, we're insulin resistant, this is a big reason why men cannot get erections.
Yeah, I'm seeing some of the questions in the chat. Does it cause a headache? The side effects of PT-141 sometimes can cause a little bit of nausea initially, but it does subside. But maybe you could talk about some of the side effects of both tadalafil, as well as how these two pair really, really well together.
Yes, yes, I can. Because again, they pair together because it's the brain working with the body. It's not just like I always go back to Viagra in my mind when I think about the thrill pill, when I think about these three things together, is it's not just a physical response for many men after the age of 35, 40. Like you have to have that brain component as well. Like arousal really starts in the brain. Side effects of PT-141, I have actually experienced some nausea from taking it, but I am a more is more kind of person. So I'm always like, let's push the envelope and see, if I can take a little bit more than I'm supposed to. And so once the nausea hit, I was like, okay, now I know just to take the, recommended dose. Headache and nausea are the two most common symptoms. I would say that, 30 to 40% of my clients on just straight PT 141 did experience a mild level of nausea. That tends to happen the first or second time you inject and then tends to go away. So the longer you take it, the fewer side effects you're going to have. And when I say nausea, it's a very small amount of nausea, usually not enough to like prevent them from, hopping in the sack.
We're not trying this again. That's right.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little about connection and
Mhm.
how important connection is, because we talked about the wiring, we talked about the piping and all the great analogies, but then there's the connection that happens as a result. And oxytocin is involved in that, right? Maybe you could just share what oxytocin is. In women, I know it's the bonding hormone between a
Mhm.
mother while she's nursing a child, and she also releases that during delivery. But what role does oxytocin play in men,
Yes,
in
yeah.
male
I mean,
physiology?
men still want to bond. They still want connection, especially, after getting to this point in life, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, like you start to realize the things that matter and don't matter. And, when you're surrounded by people you love, a partner you love, that connection is really important, especially if you're in a relationship with someone who also, desires you. They want connection. Your wife or your partner, like they want connection. And so it becomes more important as that third piece of the trifecta for libido. for men to enhance connection. And that is, as Honey said, what oxytocin's role is. It's the love hormone, it's the cuddle hormone, it's the bonding hormone. And usually people will release oxytocin naturally after they climax. So after you've had an orgasm, your body releases oxytocin naturally. That's why you just kind of lay there in each other's arms and, everything seems so like calm and warm for a little bit because you released oxytocin. So we're kind of preempting that. So you're feeling like you're emotionally getting in the mood, like emotionally connecting to your partner even before the sexual act. And that's really important for men, just because it strengthens bonding, it strengthens trust, and it strengthens that emotional connection. The other thing it does, probably more important on the physical side, it amplifies arousal signals. It makes sexual experiences feel more rewarding. Let's just say, like my husband and I, we've been married 25 years, Is it as fun every single time as it was like the first year? Probably not, Sometimes it is, but not all the time. But that oxytocin truly can make, your sexual experiences feel more deep and more rewarding. And I will tell you guys this, like I've actually, shocker, I know, I've taken oxytocin like at a dose that was too high from what I should have taken. And it like you can tell, like I felt very like flushed and warm, and I could tell something was happening in my brain and body. It's like it is a powerful hormone.
And now I'm curious. What did you feel? Because I know a lot of people take oxytocin by itself. Do you want to just go around and give people hugs, or do you feel
No, it's not
connected to
ecstasy.
people? Okay.
Yeah. No, it you just I felt very more. I've actually repeated this experiment many times because it did feel so good. The only problem with oxytocin is you don't want to take too much because it will shut down your body's own production of oxytocin after a time. But I felt very warm. I felt very tingly. I felt like my pupils were kind of dilating. Actually, I had to sit down because I just felt like kind of overwhelmed by like physically or emotionally. My body was warm. It was just a very lovely feeling, one that I kind of wanted to recreate, over and over again until my coach was like, slow down on the oxytocin there, Jennifer. Like, you don't want to shut down your own production. It was a good feeling.
Robin wrote, "You're torturing us single people." Listen, Robin, I am single too, and don't you worry, I have a solution for us. You just
Yes.
have to wait a week and you'll find out
Listen,
what the solution is. Don't you
even us married people like that solution, honey.
worry. Jennifer knows exactly what I'm talking about. Someone wrote, "Does PT-141 cause irritability?" I guess anytime there's no release, there's irritability and there's a stimuli, but no, I haven't heard of that. Jennifer, do you want to elaborate or do you know anything about that?
I have also not heard that. That's not to say it couldn't happen. It just depends on where your nervous system is at. We've done a ton of talking about the nervous system. If you've got a fried nervous system and in non-existent cortisol or really high cortisol, and you throw something on top of that, it could make you a little bit more jumpy and more irritable because it's working on the brain. It's working on, your biochemistry. But for the most part, it kind of calms people down.
That is good to know. Um, Someone asked about what about the administration of PT-141? Bremelanotide is it an injection right now? The FDA approved version of it. So here at Ellie, we have combined the three together, PT-141, oxytocin, as well as tadalafil. We call that the thrill pill. It's currently available. There's a surprise coming next week for everyone. However, there is PT-141 available by itself as an injection. Do you want to add to that, Jennifer?
Yeah, there are a couple ways that you can take it. I prefer the thrill pill. My clients prefer the thrill pill because the couple of people that did not feel great on the PT-141 injection with the nausea reported very few side effects with the thrill pill.
There you go. So bringing everything together when PT-141, tadalafil, oxytocin, when they're used together under guidance, how does it all just bring it all together for us now?
Yep. Okay, great. So PT-141, think of it as restoring desire signals in your brain, all right? Tadalafil improves blood flow and performance. Kind of think of it as like ta-da, I'm here, You know what I'm saying? I'm showing up tonight, right? And then that oxytocin is really going to help with that bonding, that connection. And so it's mind, body, and spirit really that it's helping you with, to really bring your sexual awareness into a new era in midlife. It doesn't have to fizzle out. It literally can be better than ever. Like ours is better than ever. And I'm 43, my husband's 48. And so that's kind of what I want as a hormone educator for everyone around me as well, because it can be so fulfilling.
Jennifer, one thing we didn't touch on, and I know it's something that men talk about amongst themselves, it's premature ejaculation, right? Do any of these help with that? We talk about erectile dysfunction, but that's very different than premature ejaculation. So can you share a little bit of information around PE,
Yeah.
so the
So
ED?
if I were to, like, not that I'm going to ask you guys here, but if I were to go through and ask everyone on this call, like, is that an issue for you? Generally, it tends to not be that much of an issue for like, men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. That tends to happen a little bit earlier. That can be, people in their teens or 20s. So, usually what's happening there is just an inappropriate sexual response. Like there's not enough time. And the problem in midlife is almost that there's too much time, right? We have a timing issue. And so I don't think I would use like any one of these hormones necessarily with premature ejaculation, but I would definitely go in and get your testosterone levels checked and make sure that your testosterone levels are within optimal range for your age range. Get your DHEA levels checked, get your free testosterone checked, and look at your blood sugar and look at your insulin. Because if something is going on, that is not normal, if this is something new that's cropped up, or even if it's something you've been struggling with for a long time, like just make sure everything is metabolically fine in your body. If it's premature ejaculation that's happening and everything's fine in your body, like, you might be a healthy, active man that just needs a little bit more sexual activity, a little bit more gratification. You're welcome.
I love that. Gentlemen, I would love to see your questions, okay? The six of you that are on this call with your cameras on, please don't hesitate. Put it in here. We'd love to answer. Someone asked, do you still get a tan with the thrill pill with PT-141?
Okay, my daughter asked me about this. She's like, Mom, can I go on melanotan? Will you give me some PT-140? And I was like, no, girl, she's 18. So no, no, for many reasons. But she says a lot of like actual like teenagers in her dorm are using melanotan to actually get a tan. This is doubly funny because she lives in Orange County at the beach. I was like, just go to the beach. um, but I think that nope, I totally lost where I was going with that. Ask the question again.
Does PT-141 cause a tan? It does if you
Yes.
used
Well, because it
prolonged.
acts on the melanocortin receptors in the brain, and those melanocortin receptors are going to cause your body to release more melanin, which can increase that tan look.
That's right. Some people even go on to call it the Barbie pill or Barbie spray or whatever it is, the Barbie injection,
We've
because
all seen
it
them.
makes you horny, it gives you a tan, and it actually slims you down too. We didn't talk about that. It suppresses appetite. That's another side effect of PT-141. So
I love
yeah,
it. Who
I know.
doesn't want that? We should put it in the water.
The Barbie and Ken. It's the Barbie and Ken pill. Um, So, Alex, I'm going to call you out, Alex, by name. You mentioned desire. Does that extend beyond just sexual desires?
That's quite a philosophical
It
question.
is
I like
philosophical.
it.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah. I don't know if I could speak to that. I know that some peptides, like let's just say a GLP-1, right? Even though we're using that in obesity medicine and helping it to, cut down food cravings, it also cuts down nicotine cravings and gambling cravings and eating disorder cravings. So I could see a way that, other peptides might work on the same pathways, especially because PT-141 works on your dopamine pathways in your brain. It definitely could increase desire for, I don't know, culture or music or something else to make your life more fulfilling.
Mm, I like that question.
I
Um,
know.
let's talk about
Oh,
actually, this is a great question. What do you recommend for men with low testosterone? So our first go-to is, testosterone TRT, and but there are natural ways to increase testosterone. So let's talk about the natural ways without having to use any medication or synthetic methods.
Yeah,
What do you
absolutely.
recommend to increase testosterone in men
So
naturally?
studies show that weightlifting, if you're not lifting weights, studies show that weightlifting will increase testosterone, free testosterone levels in men. The other thing that will increase testosterone levels is a higher protein, higher fat diet because the backbone of your testosterone molecule is cholesterol. So if you're not eating a healthy whole food diet, not saying you have to add like 100 grams of fat to your diet, but make sure you're eating a healthy whole foods diet with enough fat and enough protein. There are also some over-the-counter supplements like DHEA. It can be a little like, be careful, it's a hormone, but it's also available in the United States as an over-the-counter supplement, essentially. And DHEA on the steroid hormone cascade is a precursor to androstenedione, which is a precursor to testosterone. So men could take that somewhere between 25, 50, 100 milligrams. Check with your doctor, of course. I'm not a doctor, but somewhere around there to restore testosterone levels by way of that steroid hormone cascade.
Mm, thank you for sharing that. Amy asked, are the injections and nasal spray a daily thing? Actually, no. They're not. They're not meant to be used more than once every 24 hours and no more than 2 times a week. That's the FDA's recommendation, and no more than 8 times a month, because it starts to cause, there's some side effects if you use it in prolonged cases. But kudos to the people that need it more than 8 times a month or more than 2 to 3 times a week. I mean, um,
I
but
have
do you
to
have
say,
any?
honey, I know I'm a woman, but I have been using it. Just, it's fun. And I will say that if I take it one day, the effects for me will last a few
Oh,
days. So it's not like
oh,
it leaves my body, once we're done having sex and then it's gone. Like it will stay around.
yes, that is true. It does typically last 2 to 3 days, when you take it. If your body is in constant fight or flight mode, stress, can PT 141 just help for overall body calming?
That's not the first thing I would go to, right? I suppose, with the biophysiology, it could, but it wouldn't be the most effective way to, restore balance to your nervous system. You guys can watch my last presentation with Ellie, but we talk about like circadian rhythm, optimizing your sunlight, getting enough protein, making sure you're optimizing your minerals, getting enough potassium, getting enough magnesium, making sure you have some sort of practice, like a gratitude practice or a journaling practice or a breath work practice or just like a doing nothing practice. If that's not your jam, like go outside and sit for 5 minutes with no phones doing nothing. Some way to kind of self regulate your nervous system while really dialing in your nutrition and not over exercising. Those are like my top tips for managing stress because PT 141 can't overcome an autonomic nervous system that's like completely out of whack.
Todd, who is a medical doctor with 30 years of experience, congressional medical expert on steroids, wrote, sleep 7 to 8 hours will help HGH and testosterone levels. Heavy lifting, stress will drop testosterone, improve blood flow. Very much like what you were saying, Jennifer. Thank you for sharing that, Todd. And if you have any more advice, please put it in. Um, I just don't want to desire an Oreo McFlurry at 11 p.m.
I think that's Alex going back to his desire. So I misunderstood. I took it as an existential question. You were talking about McDonald's. I get it. Okay. So no, it's not necessarily going to like jack up your appetite really high unless you have like, a hour-long marathon sex session. You might desire, a McFlurry afterwards, but it doesn't work in that way where it's like increasing the desire for dopamine. It's working on the dopamine receptor or increasing like the need for more dopamine. It's working on the dopamine receptor itself.
Mm. Rosie wrote, will this help for a faster orgasm, faster or stronger orgasm?
Yes. Yes.
We're
I'll
leaving
just
it
say,
as a yes.
I know this to be
That's it.
true.
Period. Oh, Todd wrote, stress management. Thank you. Thymoxin Alpha 1, do you recommend it for calming? It's an immunomodulator. So for calming, for its
Yeah.
calming.
I don't. Thymosin alpha 1 is not a peptide I use for calming. We're using it more for immune system health, like autoimmune disease, right? Like actual immune system that's kind of in disarray. Like that is more where you would use it. For calming, my go-tos are literally magnesium, right? If you're really stressed out, getting magnesium and potassium, your minerals. And then a lot of people do well on some of the, like ashwagandha or rhodiola. But I have found that mineral balance is more powerful than any supplement I've ever given to anyone to calm the nervous system, on top of balancing your circadian rhythm. Getting 5 minutes of outside time, sun, before you look at any screen in the morning, and repeating that at noon and at twilight. Like that is how my clients dial in their nervous system. And I see it work over and over and over again.
No. Well, as we wrap up, and Alex, let me just read your comment. He said, a reason for men not to skip leg day is that exercises like squats, deadlifts, lunges increase systematic stress. So you'll get a spike of acute testosterone, not necessarily effective long term, but going heavy with lower body definitely helps with. Thank you. Um, as we wrap up, Jennifer, do you have any last comments, anything else that you would like to share to our men here on this call?
Men, thank you for putting up with me. I know I'm not one of you, but I love my husband. I love my boys, love getting to work with my male clients. And I really appreciate you guys coming out to listen to this, and the women who support the men here. Now, people always ask me with regards to peptides, will this work for me, Jennifer? Like, how should I know if I should try this? And I always tell them, the only way you know is if you try. Peptides are, biosimilar compounds. They're really fairly safe if you have your foundations in place, like your sun and your sleep and your minerals and your exercise. And so if you're like, maybe that would make my life a little better, enhance my life, just try it and see, and then come back to us and tell us what you think.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. This is amazing. And thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies, for joining us on our monthly educational call. This is awesome. For our audience, please reach out to the person who invited you to catch the replay again. It'll be out tomorrow, and you can share this video. Thank you, Jennifer, for coming out and educating our community. This is what makes it so special. We're community powered health, and it's thanks to every single one of you here that make this company so special. So thank you all so, so much for sharing your evening with us. We love you, and we will see you next month. Same time, same place. See you then. Thank you all. Have a wonderful night. Mwah. Take care. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, honey. Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care. Thank you.